In October 2019, a chilling series of events unfolded in Cape Coral, Florida. Two women strangled, one run over in a brutal act of violence, all within hours of each other. The man behind these heinous crimes? Wade Wilson, a career criminal who came to be infamously known as the Deadpool Killer. What drove this man to commit such unspeakable acts? Before we unravel the dark and twisted details of this case, take a moment to like and subscribe so you never miss a deep dive into stories like this one. Now, let's uncover the terrifying truth behind Wade Wilson's rampage. Cape Coral, Florida, a picturesque coastal city known for its canals and serene neighborhoods. But in October 2019, the peace was shattered by a series of horrifying events that would forever leave their mark. Christine Melton, a vibrant 35-year-old with a bright future ahead, was found brutally strangled in her own home. Just hours later, Diane Ruiz, a 43-year-old beloved by her community, was reported missing. Her lifeless body was discovered days later, run over multiple times in a shocking act of violence. The connection? Wade Wilson, a man with a criminal history and a disturbing penchant for identifying himself with the Marvel anti-hero Deadpool. The media quickly dubbed him the Deadpool Killer, a name that fueled both public outrage and morbid curiosity. This case became notorious, not just for its sheer brutality, but for the strange, almost cinematic parallels to the character Wilson idolized. As we delve into this story, we'll uncover the events leading to the murders, the investigation that unraveled the truth, and the trial that brought some semblance of justice. Wade Wilson, a man whose troubled past set the stage for the violent acts he would commit. Wade Wilson's criminal history was a patchwork of escalating offenses. His record was riddled with charges, including burglary, grand theft, and firearm theft. Each arrest painted a picture of a man unable, or unwilling, to stay on the right side of the law. But his crimes weren't limited to theft. His behavior had grown increasingly erratic, hinting at deeper issues beneath the surface. Wilson's struggles extended far beyond his criminal activities. He battled severe drug addiction for years, cycling through arrests, brief stints in rehabilitation, and relapses that plunged him deeper into chaos. Methamphetamine use, in particular, seemed to fuel his paranoia and erratic behavior. Friends and acquaintances described him as someone who could flip from charm to rage in an instant, a ticking time bomb waiting to explode. Mental health issues compounded his problems. Reports suggest that Wilson suffered from severe depression and mood disorders. He often spiraled into delusional thinking, further exacerbated by his drug use. And then, there was his obsession with the Marvel character Deadpool. Deadpool, a wisecracking anti-hero known for his violent tendencies and lack of moral compass, became more than just a fictional character to Wade Wilson. For him, Deadpool was an identity. Wilson would often reference the character in conversations, wear merchandise emblazoned with Deadpool's face, and even sign his name as Deadpool in some interactions. It was as if he saw himself reflected in the character's chaotic, destructive nature. But while Deadpool's antics were confined to the pages of a comic book or the silver screen, Wilson's actions were terrifyingly real. As we turn our attention to the victims, we see a stark contrast to Wilson's dark path. Christine Melton, at 35 years old, was described by friends as a bright light in the lives of those around her. She had a magnetic personality and a strong work ethic, juggling her career with her love for her family. Christine's life wasn't without its challenges, but she faced them with resilience and determination. Diane Ruiz, 43, was equally beloved by her community. She was known for her warmth and kindness, always willing to lend a hand or offer a kind word. Diane's friends and family described her as a nurturing soul, someone who found joy in the simplest things and radiated positivity wherever she went. While the two women didn't share an obvious connection at first glance, their paths intersected with Wilson's in chilling ways. Christine and Wilson had a fleeting relationship, a brief, tumultuous encounter that left Christine wary. Diane's connection to Wilson was more indirect, but her fate was sealed when she crossed paths with him on that fateful day in October. Beyond the personal stories of the victims and the perpetrator, this case also forces us to confront broader societal questions. How much did media and pop culture influence Wade Wilson's descent into violence? Did his identification with Deadpool, a character celebrated for his unapologetic chaos, blur the lines between fiction and reality for a man already struggling with mental health issues? Moreover, the case highlights systemic failures. Could earlier interventions, whether through the justice system, mental health care, or addiction treatment, have prevented these tragedies? Or was Wade Wilson's path to violence inevitable, a result of unchecked issues compounding over time? As we piece together these layers of Wilson's background, one thing becomes painfully clear: this story isn't just about one man's actions. It's about the lives he destroyed, the warning signs that went unnoticed, and the societal conditions that allowed his downward spiral to culminate in unimaginable violence. October 7, 2019, began like any other day in Cape Coral, Florida. The city's streets bustled with life as residents went about their routines, blissfully unaware that a series of horrifying events was about to unfold, events that would leave 2 women dead and a community shaken to its core. That morning, Wade Wilson crossed paths with Christine Melton at a local bar. Christine had met Wilson before during their brief and turbulent relationship. Witnesses later described their interaction as tense but not overtly alarming. Christine had voiced concerns about Wilson to her friends in the past, mentioning his erratic behavior and unpredictable temper. Still, no one could have anticipated the horrific turn the day would take. Wilson and Christine eventually left the bar together and headed to her home. What transpired next inside those walls remains partially shrouded in mystery, but forensic evidence and Wilson's later confession paint a grim picture. At some point during their time together, an argument erupted. Fueled by anger and his history of violent tendencies, Wilson attacked Christine. He strangled her with brutal force until her body went limp. Forensic investigators would later note signs of a violent struggle in Christine's home: overturned furniture, scattered belongings, and marks on her neck consistent with manual strangulation. It was clear she had fought for her life. But Wilson, in a fit of rage or cold calculation, had overpowered her. By mid-morning, Christine Melton was dead. But Wade Wilson wasn't finished. After leaving Christine's home, he continued his deadly rampage. By early afternoon, Diane Ruiz, a 43-year-old woman known for her kind and generous nature, was on her way to work. Diane had no prior connection to Wade Wilson. She was simply in the wrong place at the wrong time. According to eyewitness accounts, Wilson spotted Diane walking along a quiet street and approached her. What followed was a horrifying act of violence. Wilson attacked Diane, strangling her with the same ruthless intent he had shown earlier that day. Her body was found days later in a wooded area, bearing signs of the struggle she endured. But what made Diane's murder even more gruesome was what came next. After killing Diane, Wilson took her lifeless body and placed it in the path of an oncoming vehicle, a vehicle he had stolen earlier that day. Witnesses described seeing Wilson repeatedly drive over her body, as if to ensure there was no chance she could survive. This act of sheer brutality was both calculated and senseless, leaving even seasoned investigators stunned. The forensic evidence from Diane's murder scene was harrowing. Tire marks on her body and the surrounding area told the story of Wilson's monstrous actions. Her injuries were consistent with both strangulation and blunt force trauma, confirming the horrifying sequence of events. But as the investigation unfolded, questions began to emerge. Some eyewitness accounts suggested that Wilson seemed erratic and disoriented, while others described him as disturbingly calm and methodical. These conflicting reports raised doubts about his state of mind during the murders. Was he acting under the influence of drugs? Was this a calculated spree? Or was it a chaotic outburst fueled by a deeply fractured psyche? Adding to the intrigue were inconsistencies in Wilson's own accounts. After his arrest, he confessed to the murders but gave varying details about his motives and actions. At times, he claimed he had no memory of the events; at other times, he offered chillingly specific recollections, as if reliving the moments with no remorse. What drove Wade Wilson to commit such heinous acts remains a point of debate. His history of violence, drug abuse, and mental health struggles undoubtedly played a role. But the level of brutality he exhibited, strangling 2 women and desecrating one of their bodies, went beyond anything he had done before. As we move forward, we'll explore how law enforcement pieced together the puzzle of Wilson's crimes, the challenges they faced in bringing him to justice, and the broader implications of a case that continues to haunt the community of Cape Coral. As the sun set on October 7, 2019, the Cape Coral Police Department was already beginning to piece together a puzzle that would shock the community. 2 women, Christine Melton and Diane Ruiz, had disappeared under eerily similar circumstances. The clock was ticking, and every moment mattered. The first clue came from Christine Melton's home. When Christine failed to respond to calls and messages, concerned friends and family alerted the authorities. Officers arriving at her residence were greeted by a chilling scene, signs of a violent struggle. Furniture was overturned, personal belongings were scattered, and blood evidence hinted at a gruesome altercation. But what truly alarmed investigators were the ligature marks found on Christine's body. She had been strangled, and the sheer brutality of the crime suggested it was no random act. Meanwhile, reports of Diane Ruiz's disappearance were beginning to surface. Diane, a reliable and hard-working woman, had failed to show up for her shift that afternoon. Her co-workers, alarmed by her uncharacteristic absence, notified the police. Witnesses had last seen Diane walking to work, a familiar routine for her. Now, she was nowhere to be found. As investigators worked tirelessly to establish a connection between the two cases, they began collecting evidence. One of the first breakthroughs came in the form of surveillance footage. Cameras near Christine Melton's home captured a familiar figure entering and leaving her residence on the morning of October 7. That figure was Wade Wilson. Wilson was no stranger to law enforcement. His criminal record was extensive, and his erratic behavior had drawn attention in the past. As detectives dug deeper, they discovered Wilson had a history with Christine, a volatile relationship that had ended on bad terms. This connection immediately elevated him to the status of prime suspect. But Wilson was nowhere to be found. In the hours following Diane Ruiz's disappearance, he had vanished, leaving investigators scrambling to track him down. The breakthrough came from an unlikely source, Wade Wilson's own father. On October 9, 2 days after the murders, Wilson called his father and confessed to the crimes. In a chilling and emotionless tone, he admitted to killing Christine Melton and Diane Ruiz. His father, horrified and desperate to prevent further harm, contacted law enforcement. This confession was the turning point in the investigation. With Wilson's location now known, authorities moved quickly to apprehend him. He was found hiding in a motel, disheveled and showing clear signs of drug use. Despite his attempt to evade capture, Wilson was taken into custody without incident. As the investigation continued, forensic evidence began to solidify the case against Wilson. DNA collected from Christine Melton's home matched Wilson's profile. Tire marks at the scene of Diane Ruiz's murder matched the stolen vehicle Wilson had been driving. In addition, witnesses who had seen Wilson near both crime scenes came forward, providing crucial testimony that placed him at the heart of the crimes. But the case wasn't without its challenges. Wilson's erratic behavior and shifting accounts of the murders made it difficult for investigators to establish a clear motive. He alternated between denying responsibility, claiming memory loss, and describing the events in chilling detail. At one point, he even suggested that his actions were influenced by his obsession with the Marvel character Deadpool, further blurring the line between reality and delusion. Despite these challenges, the evidence against Wilson was overwhelming. Investigators worked tirelessly to build a case that would hold up in court, knowing that the families of Christine Melton and Diane Ruiz were counting on them for justice. This phase of the investigation revealed not only the meticulous work of law enforcement but also the tragic details of a crime spree that could have been prevented. Wade Wilson's history of violence, substance abuse, and mental health issues had been a ticking time bomb. The system had failed to intervene, and the consequences were devastating. As the investigation came to a close, the focus shifted to the courtroom, where Wilson would face the full weight of his actions. But the scars left by his crimes would remain, on the families of his victims, on the Cape Coral community, and on a justice system forced to reckon with its own shortcomings. The trial of Wade Wilson was one of the most anticipated in Florida's recent history, drawing national attention for its brutality and the bizarre behavior of the man dubbed the Deadpool Killer. After years of delays, procedural hearings, and preparation, the trial began in 2024, promising justice for the victims and answers for a community still reeling from the horrific crimes. The prosecution's case was meticulously constructed, leaving no doubt about Wilson's guilt. They painted him as a dangerous individual, detailing his long history of criminal behavior, mental instability, and drug abuse. Prosecutors outlined the events of October 7, 2019, step by step, using forensic evidence, surveillance footage, and eyewitness testimony to weave a chilling narrative. They showed how Wilson targeted Christine Melton and Diane Ruiz, highlighting the calculated nature of the murders. The jury was shown graphic images of the crime scenes, including the signs of struggle in Christine's home and the devastating injuries inflicted on Diane. Tire marks from the stolen vehicle matched those found on Diane's body, and DNA evidence from both victims further tied Wilson to the murders. But it wasn't just the physical evidence that sealed Wilson's fate. Witness testimonies added a human dimension to the case. Friends and family of both Christine and Diane took the stand, sharing stories of the women they had lost and recounting the pain of their sudden, violent deaths. Some even described interactions with Wilson before the murders, painting a picture of a man whose unpredictability and violent tendencies had long been a source of fear. The defense, on the other hand, faced an uphill battle. They attempted to argue that Wilson's actions were the result of severe mental illness and drug addiction, claiming he was incapable of forming intent for premeditated murder. Psychiatrists testified about Wilson's struggles with depression, substance abuse, and delusional thinking, including his obsession with the character Deadpool. They suggested that Wilson's distorted sense of reality played a significant role in the crimes. Despite these arguments, Wilson's demeanor in court undermined the defense's efforts. He appeared indifferent, often smirking or showing no emotion as the prosecution presented graphic details of his crimes. At one point, he even made a flippant comment about his nickname, Deadpool Killer, which only further enraged the public. His lack of remorse left a lasting impression on the jury and spectators alike. After weeks of testimony and evidence, the trial reached its conclusion. The jury deliberated for just a few hours before returning a unanimous verdict. Wade Wilson was found guilty of 2 counts of first-degree murder. In August 2024, he was sentenced to death. The announcement of the verdict was met with mixed emotions. For the families of Christine Melton and Diane Ruiz, it was a moment of relief but also a stark reminder of the loved ones they had lost. They expressed gratitude to the prosecutors and law enforcement for their relentless pursuit of justice but lamented that no sentence could truly heal the wounds left by Wilson's actions. The media coverage of the trial was intense, with news outlets dissecting every detail of the proceedings. The nickname Deadpool Killer became a grim moniker for Wilson, sparking debates about the influence of pop culture on individuals like him. Many questioned whether Wilson's identification with the violent anti-hero had fueled his crimes or whether it was merely an excuse for his already destructive tendencies. Beyond the courtroom, the case had a broader societal impact. It reignited discussions about mental health care and the justice system's role in addressing individuals who show clear warning signs of violent behavior. Critics argued that Wilson's actions could have been prevented if he had received proper treatment or if the justice system had intervened earlier in his life. For the residents of Cape Coral, the trial's conclusion marked the end of a dark chapter, but the scars remained. The memory of Christine Melton and Diane Ruiz was honored in local memorials, with friends and family emphasizing their vibrant lives rather than the horrific way they ended. As Wade Wilson awaited his fate on death row, the case continued to serve as a cautionary tale, a stark reminder of the devastating consequences of unchecked violence, untreated mental illness, and the fragile line between fiction and reality. The case of Wade Wilson, the so-called Deadpool Killer, forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about the intersection of mental health, media influence, and the justice system. Wilson's obsession with the Deadpool persona raises difficult questions. To what extent can pop culture influence already unstable individuals? While the character may have been a distorted source of identity for Wilson, his long history of violence and untreated mental health issues suggests deeper systemic failures. This case also highlights the justice system's handling of individuals with clear warning signs. Wilson's criminal history, marked by escalating violence, drug abuse, and erratic behavior, painted a portrait of a man in desperate need of intervention. Yet, time and again, opportunities to divert him from this destructive path were missed. Could stronger mental health programs or earlier legal action have prevented the tragic deaths of Christine Melton and Diane Ruiz? Then there's the death penalty, Wilson's ultimate sentence. Supporters argue it delivers justice for heinous crimes, while critics question its moral and practical implications in a modern society. Does capital punishment serve as a deterrent, or is it merely a symbolic response to acts we struggle to comprehend? Finally, this case leaves us with lingering questions about accountability. How do we balance personal responsibility with the societal factors that shape an individual's path? And how do we, as a community, prevent such tragedies from happening again. As we close this chapter, we invite you to share your thoughts. What lessons do you take from this story, and how can we, as a society, better address the root causes of such devastating crimes? Christine Melton and Diane Ruiz were two vibrant lives tragically cut short, their stories a sobering reminder of the darkness that can lurk in our communities. Through this documentary, we've explored the chilling events of October 2019, the investigation that brought Wade Wilson to justice, and the broader societal issues that demand our attention: mental health, justice reform, and media influence. As we remember Christine and Diane, let's reflect on the lessons this case offers and the importance of taking action to prevent similar tragedies in the future. If you found this story compelling, share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to like and subscribe to join us for more true crime documentaries that uncover the stories behind the headlines.